Welcome to Audarya Vision, a podcast where we try to develop a vision, a spiritual vision of compassion, of love, of nobility, of magnanimity, of generosity. These are all words that are synonymous with the word Audarya. Here we're going to listen to a lecture I was fortunate to give at the Bhakti Center in downtown Manhattan, one of the greatest Bhakti Yoga centers, I would say, on the planet. And the title of this lecture is called God Protects the Surrendered Soul. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from the 10th canto, Chapter 1, verse 17. And it's interesting because right now, like, we're starting. If you know your Krishna book, the first sentence of the Krishna book, volume 1, right, chapter 1. Once the world was overburdened by the unnecessary defense force of different kings who were actually demons but were posing themselves as the royal order. That's the first sentence of Krishna book. So that first sentence of Krishna book corresponds to this Srimad Bhagavatam 10.1.17 verse today. So I'll just read the Sanskrit, right? And then the translation and Prabhupada's purport, correct? Okay. Bhumi dripa nripa vyaja daityanika shatayutai akranta bhuri bharena brahmanam sharanam yayo. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse. I hesitate because, Prabhupada didn't translate the whole 10th canto, but this is at the very beginning, so this was translated by Prabhupada. Translation. Once, when Mother Earth was overburdened by hundreds of thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings, she approached Lord Brahma for relief. I'll read it again. Once, when Mother Earth was overburdened by hundreds of thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings, she approached Lord Brahma for relief. And Srila Prabhupada's purport. When the world is overburdened by unnecessary military arrangements, and when various demoniac kings are the executive heads of state, this burden causes the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata adbhutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Quote, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I appear myself. Unquote. When the residents of this earth become atheistic and godless, they descend to the status of animals like dogs and hogs, and thus their only business is to bark among themselves. This is dharmasya glani, deviation from the goal of life. Human life is meant for attaining the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, but when people are godless and the presidents or kings or CEOs of big corporations are unnecessarily puffed up with military power, their business is to fight and increase the military strength of their different states. I can't help but, now, Prabhupada, you'll see in this purport, Prabhupada is very much sort of condemning over the top, government power. But if Prabhupada was here, perhaps he would make the same remark regarding, the overpowering power that big corporations have on us today. So continuing with Prabhupada's statement, nowadays, therefore, it appears that every state is busy manufacturing atomic weapons to prepare for a third world war. Such preparations are certainly unnecessary. They reflect the false pride of the heads of state. A small little parenthesis anecdote you may not know, Ravindra Suruprabhu tells the story of how he would hear in the early days, Prabhupada often, sort of predict or speak about an upcoming Third World War. You see it in the database, but then Prabhupada sort of stopped talking about that. So Ravindra Swarup Prabhu says he asked Prabhupada's secretary at the time, like, can you ask Prabhupada, like, what's the update, or why did you? And then Prabhupada apparently told that secretary who told Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, Krishna changed his mind. Interesting. The real business of a chief executive is to see to the happiness of the mass of people by training them in Krishna consciousness in different divisions of life. Chaturvarnyam maya shrishtam guna karma vibhagasha from Bhagavad Gita 4.13. A leader should train the people as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras and engage them in various occupational duties, thus helping them progress toward Krishna consciousness. Instead, however, rogues and thieves in the guise of protectors arrange for a voting system, and in the name of democracy, they come to power by hook or crook and exploit the citizens. Even long, long ago, asuras, persons devoid of God consciousness, became the heads of state, and now this is happening again. The various states of the world are preoccupied with arranging for military strength. Sometimes they spend 65% of the government's revenue for this purpose. But why should people's hard-earned money be spent in this way? Because of the present world situation, Krishna has descended in the form of the Krishna consciousness movement. Ki Jai. This is quite natural, for without the Krishna consciousness movement, the world cannot be peaceful and happy. Here's Prabhupada's translation again. Once, when Mother Earth was overburdened by hundreds of thousands of military phalanxes of various conceited demons dressed like kings, she approached Lord Brahma for relief. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Kshakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhyaivacha patitanam paramibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Jayadev Goswami Ki Jai. In the purport, Prabhupada quotes this famous verse, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata, the two sort of classic verses, 4.7 and 4.8. And every time practically I read or remember this verse, it takes me back to the years when I was distributing Srila Prabhupada's books in the Los Angeles airport. And I remember there were a considerable amount of tourists who would come from India to visit Disneyland or other parts of America. And so when I would approach Indian gentlemen and ladies, I would offer them the Bhagavad Gita, and most of the time, like 99% of the time, they would politely say, no thank you, we know the Bhagavad Gita. So I got to a point where I would just ask, okay, well then if you know the Bhagavad Gita, what's your favorite verse from the Bhagavad Gita? And in most cases they would become a little bit flustered because they hadn't read the Bhagavad Gita. But then they would come up, they would like invariably always say, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata, because at the time there was this big television series in India called on Doordarshan television, which showed a famous Mahabharata series, and this was before like there were tons of channels. So and the series, the Mahabharata series, started with the sort of a trailer that had this soundtrack, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya. So like every Indian who may not have read the Bhagavad Gita knew that verse because they watched that through a Darshan television series. So it got to a point where I would say, okay, what's your favorite verse? But you cannot quote Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya. Aside from that verse, what's your favorite verse? Is that?
I'm not sure. Sorry, I think that's good.
It's all good. So basically the theme of the class today, the title is as we can see from the verse and how this whole Bhagavatam 10th canto starts with Krishna's Leela. And as Prabhupada quotes in the purport, Krishna protects his devotees. That's basically it. Krishna protects his devotees in reciprocation with their, appeal. That's the whole conclusion. That's the whole essence here. Krishna protects his devotees. Krishna reciprocates and protects his devotees. And while we may not have all had direct experiences of, Krishna protecting us, as, for example, Krishna protected Prahlad Maharaj, we hear in the Bhagavatam, I think it's safe to say that we can at least relate with the principle, and to a certain degree we can claim that we've had experiences to a smaller degree of Krishna intervening in our life, or times in our lives where we've really felt, wow, that Krishna really protected me on that one. Krishna protected me from a bad relationship, or Krishna protected me from some accident, or Krishna protected me from myself, and so on. And that's what Krishna does, according to our Vedic scriptures. When a devotee, when a soul who's surrendered to God, or who's trying to surrender his or her life to God, is in trouble, he takes shelter of God. He takes shelter of Krishna, and Krishna reciprocates. Krishna reciprocates in kind, right? And these two verses, this 4.7 and 4.8, encapsulate this point very, very well, and at the same time bring in this beautiful component of our theology, which is the avatar theory, the notion of God coming personally to protect us. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata advyutanam adharmasya tadantmadam srijamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatuskritam dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To reestablish dharma. I come, right? Whenever and wherever, Prabhupada translates, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. The other day I was walking back from the temple to the sanctuary suites, and I was just singing out loud, and some African-American young guy was like, "Hey, Kirtan, I love it, man." So we started talking. It turns out he's a friend of Jay Shetty and Janavi, and so we started talking about the principle of Kirtan, and I said, just like, that movie Spike, it's from the old movie of Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing. So this notion of doing the right thing, we could say that's another word for dharma, righteous or harmonious action in this world in accordance to the laws of God, right? Do the right thing. So, and I said, so in this age, the doing the right thing is to chant Hare Krishna, basically. So he could reciprocate with that. So so Krishna says, I come down myself. I come down, and so we have this theology where we believe that not only is God a person, but He descends into this world, and not just once. For example, as Christ, who just came once in a linear time frame, but rather a personal God who comes again and again and again, yada yada, who comes again and again in a cyclical time where there's always souls who are falling from the spiritual world and wasting their time suffering in the material world until they with the influence of Krishna, use their free will to take shelter of Krishna and by His mercy go back to Him. So there's this notion of reciprocation too, like ye yata mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. As one surrenders unto me, or as one takes shelter of me, I reward him, or I reciprocate accordingly, right? There's this really cool passage in the purport to 4.8 where Prabhupada talks about the incarnation for this age, which is Lord Caitanya. Prabhupada says, I'll read this. This is about 4 or 5 sentences. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the incarnation in the age of Kali is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who spread the worship of Krishna by the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy names, and spread Krishna consciousness throughout India. He predicted that this culture of Sankirtan would be broadcast all over the world, from town to town and village to village. Lord Chaitanya, as the incarnation of Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is described secretly but not directly in the confidential parts of the revealed scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Mahabharata, and Bhagavatam. The devotees of Lord Krishna are very much attracted by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Caitanya. This avatar of the Lord does not kill the miscreants, but delivers them by his causeless mercy. I'll quote another verse, another relevant verse about Lord Chaitanya's descent, but before I forget, on this topic of avatar, Garuda Prabhu, I don't know if you know Garuda Prabhu, he's a famous scholar, devotee, a Prabhupada disciple who teaches at University of Virginia, at Christopher Newport, scholar of religious studies. He wrote a wonderful book on the Rasa Leela. That was his PhD thesis at Harvard, published by Princeton University Press. He coined this term that's used by devotees, this term polymorphic bimonotheism.
Cool.
Right? I just used it this morning.
You just heard it this morning?
Just used it this morning, that term.
Who did?
It's a I'm joking.
Oh, you just used it?
I've heard Caitanya Charan use it.
Yeah, it's really cool, isn't it? Polymorphic. Monotheism, right? We believe in one God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Naridaritir Govinda, Sarvakarana Karanam. So Govinda is that supreme original person. So we follow a very strict or very sort of radical monotheism. Like we're monotheists to the core. Intense monotheism, which is cool because then, other monotheistic traditions or members of other monotheistic traditions can hopefully relate to our theology, and vice versa. We take elements of other traditions that help us in our bhakti, but it's not really monotheism; it's bimonotheism because we worship a divine couple, Radha Krishna, right? So in that sense, we could say it's like bimonotheism. And then polymorphic, many morphic forms. Polymorphic. Here's the notion of avatar. That supreme original person, Krishna and Radha, they descend, and if they want, they can appear in, while retaining their full-fledged, omniscient, all-powerful, identities as the original personality of Godhead and his, internal manifestation of his internal potency. Because he's all-powerful, he can and does, out of lila, out of desire to enjoy different rasas with different souls and different mellows, appear in different forms. And today's important to talk about that because today is the appearance of Jayadev Goswami, who coined this notion, or who let's say explained or expressed this notion of avatar so wonderfully and famously in his Das Avatar Stotram, where he describes how Krishna appeared in different leelas, as Vamana, as Nishingadev, as Buddha, as Meena, as Matsya, and so on. So polymorphic bimonotheism. What's your religion? Oh, I just I follow the polymorphic bimonotheism tradition of India. Oh, wow. I think there's a Prabhupada several times says, right, in Kali Yuga, if you speak really like flowery words, people are really impressed. And it's true, like you go to a philosophy department, there's these like philosophers, you don't even understand what the hell they're saying. Wittgenstein or something like that, for example. And like, scholars of these big philosophers are proud that like they can understand, 10% of what the guy said. And, oh, well, yeah, he must be really, really erudite. So I guess riding that wave, we can, we do want to gain credibility for the sake of Lord Chaitanya, for the sake of Krishna in this world. So this notion of polymorphic bimonotheism sort of kills, sorry for the analogy, but kind of kills two birds with one stone. It gives a certain cachet to our tradition, which really deserves it, and at the same time explains what we're reading here quite well. So coming back to this notion of avatar and coming back to, to the essence of this avatar for us, which is, that Krishna comes as Lord Caitanya. I'd like to read one famous verse from the Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada actually refers to in the purport. This is a famous verse, Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumeda Saha. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, He is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Right. So that's the Yuga avatar for us fallen souls, right? And this avatar comes and just like he reciprocates so much. It's almost like he's dealing with zombies, and yet he reciprocates with them as if they're taking shelter of him. In the sense that, our scriptures describe that Lord Caitanya just gives Krishna prema, just gives love of God, just gives, salvation and redemption and love of God without people even asking. So it's almost, we don't kick out the principle that Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, like the ye yatamam prapadyante tam sataiva pajamyaham, as one surrenders unto me, I reward him accordingly. That principle is not to ever be forgotten or neglected or superseded by anything. At the same time, though, in a sort of a simultaneous fashion, we have this avatar of Lord Caitanya who's just like extremely kind, and it's almost like, even if you don't reciprocate or even if you don't take shelter, he'll still like, here, take the mercy, take the mercy, take the mercy. So that's the avatar for this age, A small little parenthesis, because we are dealing with this verse. There's the Sanskrit passage, a Sanskrit term, akranta, which is overburdened, and nripa vyaja, or this notion of demoniac people posing as kings, right? It's an interesting small little theme to just develop a little bit. Back at the time when this Bhagavatam is narrated, according to the narrator, demoniac beings took the disguise of kings. So, for example, we have Kamsa. The history of Kamsa is that he's a big demon. He's a big Rakshasa, and yet he appears as a probably very handsome, very elegant, very powerful, king, disguised as a king, and yet he's a Rakshasa. And so that principle, one could solidly claim, is not just a one-time thing. It's a principle that is just there always. As a matter of fact, Prabhupada, confirming this point in the purport, right, mentions that even today, right, even long ago, Asuras became the heads of state, and now this is happening again. And so, one has to be wary of that, even in the context of the society in which we live today, and really sort of have an eye out. Not that we become obsessed with who's who and blah blah blah, but the principle of ill-intended leaders posing as well-wishers, or posing as leaders of society, but actually having very atheistic, very godless consciousness and very selfish and destructive agendas is a reality. Is a reality, at least according to what the Bhagavatam says. This principle applies always. We live in a historical period where there's a lot of duality about leadership, and the current crisis that we've been experiencing worldwide for a few years. And I was going to say, there's a good chunk of T-shirts and paraphernalia out there, for example, saying arrest Fauci, to be to be relevant, or to speak of current affairs. So without getting into the topic, because that's not what we're supposed to talk about while sitting on the Vyasasana, we do have practical applications of our philosophy, and some may make a connection between what's spoken of right here in this verse about leaders who are actually demoniac in nature, but disguising as well-wishers of society and disguising themselves as kings, but actually doing detrimental and abusing and hurting innocent citizens could be of a relevant. There could be a relevant connection here, right? Unfortunately. So, how long until we have until what time? 8?
Until 8.
Until 8. So to wrap up.
We can pause for questions and reflections.
Okay, let me just finish before, if that's okay. Wanted to say just a couple more things, just a couple more sentences. Is that okay? Yeah, I guess so. So the point is, how does that relate to us and to you? Well, the point is, no matter what the situation is, whether you're living 5,000 years ago or in 2022 in New York City, no matter what situation you find yourself in, you have to take shelter of Krishna. You have to take shelter of the holy name. Who is Krishna? You have to take shelter of the message of the Bhagavat, as Raghunath Prabhu, in one of his famous songs in his early shelter years, there's a song called Message of the Bhagavat. You ever heard his early shelter music? I've got the message of the Bhagavat. I used to love that song. As a brahmachari, would go to the airport and this Prabhu would listen to this song. I sat in class for 18 years. I still got no education, but we've got the message of the Bhagavat. So this message of the Bhagavat, Krishna Katha, Prabhupada's books, is so important for you. You have to take shelter of that. In this world of duality where you don't even know what's real, what's not real, what's fake news, what's real news, what do? You take shelter of Sat, you take shelter of reality, which according to your faith, according to your belief is God, is Krishna. So you take shelter of that holy name. You have to take shelter of that holy name on a daily basis, and you have to fuel that taking shelter of the holy name with hearing Krishna Katha, and hence the importance of hearing Prabhupada's lectures or hearing lectures of devotees that you really like and reading the Bhagavatam, because doing that fuels your practice of the Yuga Dharma, fuels your desire and the quality of your japa and the quality and your enthusiasm to participate in kirtan. And that's the Yuga Dharma. That's what Lord Chaitanya came to give, right? So you should feel grateful, that Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada, the Senapati Bhakta of Lord Chaitanya have come, and that you happen to somehow or other take shelter of this mercy and of this Sankirtan movement, and you should really apply yourself to, take shelter of Krishna in the midst of dualities which are just always going to be there, So perhaps if devotees have some reflections or questions. We've got one.
You can always ask a question if nobody else has one.
So we have one live here, one question live I can repeat. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so actually you begin to speak on the last bit about Lord Chaitanya's mercy and applying yourself. My question, maybe if you have anything else you'd like to add on it, is that when thinking about how are we so fortunate to be in this age where Lord Chaitanya appeared and is that merciful, even if we're like zombies, that there's just so much, how to become receptive to that, because just thinking of it is almost bewildering that it's true, there's so much mercy, how to receive it deeper.
So in the light, I'll repeat your question, in the light of Lord Chaitanya's mercy as described, how do we become receptive to that great mercy, right? How do we access it? That's a how-to question.
How can a zombie receive the mercy?
How can a zombie receive the mercy? Well, we do have to put in our bit, and for example, just thing that comes to mind in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, when Lord Chaitanya saves Jagai and Madai, right? He does tell them, okay, from now on, though, stop your sinful life. Stop your sinful life and take shelter of the holy name. So as practitioners, we do have these 4 regulative principles that we hold as sacred, and it's a real austerity to follow them strictly, And then what to speak of if we've taken a vow of chanting 16 rounds, that's a monumental project, on a daily basis. it's not something that's done so easily, at least speaking for myself. So we really do have to, show, we have to be sincere, and we have to show Lord Caitanya that, hey, I'm trying my best, and this is the standard that Prabhupada wanted me to follow. I'm trying my best, and so yes, we just have to be sincere in following the basic sadhana, the basic program that Prabhupada gave us in the association of devotees. When we're in the association of devotees, things are just so much easier, So sadhu sanga sarva shastrekoi, lava matra sadhu sanga sarva siddhihoi. You know that verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Yes, no, sadhu sanga. So sangha with sadhus, sadhu sanga, sarva shastrekoi. The shastra, all the shastras say, lava matra sadhu sanga sarva siddhihoi. Lava matra is one, if I'm not mistaken, we'd have to ask Murli, what's his name, Murli Manohar Prabhu, the physicist? Murli Gopal. I think it's 1/11 of a second, if I'm not mistaken. A lava matra. So 1/11 of a second. So even if you get 1/11 of a second association with the sadhus, sarva siddhi. Siddhi means perfection. Sarva, all. Hoi is obtained. So all perfection is obtained even by 1/11 association, time of association with the devotee, with the sadhu. So how important sadhu sangha is, and hence, the notion of sankirtan. So just get your butt, get your butt in the kirtan, or get your butt out of bed and chant Hare Krishna. And any other questions or comments?
Just a reflection. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Bol.
Actually, I'm sorry, not a reflection. I just wanted to contribute. What a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada. Thank you.
All glories to Prabhupada.
Oh, thank you. Hare Krishna. Double all glories to Prabhupada. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Tina.
So nice to see you, and welcome to New York.
Thank you.
You live in the temple room. Following up to Emily's question, it's very interesting because we very adamantly believe, in the CC, in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name. There's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. And while we say that chanting the holy name, again, God is absolute, but it's a prayer. Please engage me in your devotional service. Please engage me in your devotional service. But because I'm curious, while we so adamantly say it's the only means is chanting the holy name, not even to say like kirtan, it's the nama, it's the name. So if we believe other traditions, say the Abrahamics, and they have prayer, for them it seems like prayer is the emphasized way. And that's directly, say, praying to God, talking to God. How do we, what is your viewpoint on that? Because that seems like they're having direct communion, they're trying to directly connect with God, talk to God. How do we, what are your thoughts around something around that?
Well, if I understand you correctly, you say that other Abrahamic traditions have sort of a sadhana where they're directly talking to God, whereas perhaps we don't in our Gaudiya tradition?
Yes. I feel like prayer is just not, like sitting and actually praying is just not, it's not so much in our tradition, and instead we're holy name, which indirectly you can say is a prayer, but it's the holy name. It's somewhat different.
Right. Well, to play the devil's advocate, we do have so many bhajans written by our acharyas in vernacular language. Remember, for us, unfortunately, they're kind of foreign because most of us don't speak classical Bengali, right? But if you go to Mayapur, and you see like local Bengalis, for example, like singing the songs of Narottam Das Thakur or Bhaktivinoda Thakur. You feel, it's the equivalent of Hillsong Christian worship on a Sunday morning, where they're like speaking in English, to Christ and totally feeling it, quote unquote, right? So that, this whole notion of translating and having our liturgy in local language is a really important topic, and perhaps that's what we'll see in future decades and centuries, and probably there'll be debates. No, there'll be some who really want the equivalent of we keep our liturgy in Latin, so Sanskrit and Bengali, and others will be like, no, let's just do it in Spanish. Or for example, there was unfortunately the leader had some difficulty, but there was this South American sort of splinter group from ISKCON called the Vrinda branch, and when it started in the late 70s, the leader asked Prabhupada's godbrother Sridhar Swami for whether they should do the liturgy in Spanish, and he said yes, totally do it. So for decades they had all their morning program in Spanish, and I speak Spanish. I'm not saying this to show off. I speak Spanish, and I'm saying this to point out that once I went to Miami, I went to one of their programs, and so I sang the morning program, the Tulsi Arti and the Tulsi Kirtan and everything in Spanish, and I was just like, oh my God, it felt so weird in a good way, because there was no more that that process of translation, the intellectual translation step that you do. It was just singing right from the heart, from the stomach, I guess, or from the heart chakra, and it felt great. So we do have, and probably like just the other day I was hearing Shruta Kirti Prabhu's Memories of Prabhupada, and when Mr. Nair in Bombay, who tried to give us so much trouble for the Juhu land, when he died, Prabhupada, while he was being massaged, said, I was praying to Krishna, or something like that, or he said, thank you, Krishna. So and Prabhupada also, the idea of talking directly to God and praying to God is definitely there in our tradition. Devotees pray to Krishna all the time. It's maybe more of a private thing, but it's exemplified in these bhajans. What are those bhajans except like Gopinath, my dear Gopinath, I'm such a sinner. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is directly talking to Krishna. So I think it is that directly talking to Krishna, communicating directly with Krishna is definitely there, I would say, in our tradition too. And nothing stops us from praying to Krishna. And we all do. Come on, like, Krishna, you gotta help me, or I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. We talk to Krishna all the time.
Haribol, Krishna. I just wanted to comment. In the Bible, it says God's name, the I am, right? The I am, right? Is an action. God is love, right? Love is action. Faith without works is dead. So one of my favorite quotes. We can pray all we want, but what are we doing behind the prayer? What are we doing? I can tell my children, I try to be a good example as a father. I said, stop telling me you love me. First of all, you haven't cleaned your room. What are you showing me? Look at my room. I tell them, look at my room. Does it look like your room? I put them on the spot. And then they say, oh, okay, Papa. And then they say it again, Papa, I love you. What are you doing? What are you doing? What I'm trying to say is that when I'm chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, I like to think of the meaning behind what it means. Oh Krishna, engage me in devotional service. Engage me in devotional service. Whatever I can do, whatever little I can do, if it's being around a devotee, if it's feeding the homeless, whatever I can do in Krishna consciousness, Father, please engage me. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Beautiful. Mic drop. Thank you, William Prabhu.
Chai, well, we have a couple of minutes, so just to wrap up, thank you, and we should pray extra hard to Lord Caitanya to help us in our life, and to help us in this situation that we're living in around the world, which is quite extraordinary, and like I said, we should feel that we should feel really lucky. We should feel like, how did this happen to us? We should feel grateful, and like Prabhu said, we should continue praying to Krishna, chanting his name. We should continue serving the Vaishnavas, serving the local society with the gifts of Krishna, and in this way we can all go back home, back to Godhead, and in the process make this world a little bit better.
Srila Prabhupada tells us if you love me, do what I tell you. If you love me, like William was saying, show me you love me. Don't just say you love me. It's easy to say that. But then where's the application? And we hope you'll call me. Maybe after class you come over to 3rd Street. Yeah, maybe you have time.
Yes, Prabhu.
Nice to see you. Fantastic class. Not just what you had to say, but the feeling behind it, the wisdom, the joy, the enthusiasm, the faith that your spiritual master is empowering you so nicely. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Jayadev Goswami ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, the Bhakti Center Sangha ki jai, ISKCON ki jai.
I have
Haribo.
something for you. I hope you'll come to 3rd Street.
Okay.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar Acharya.
My pleasure,
Wonderful,
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Beautiful smile, beautiful tilak, beautiful haircut. Thank you so much.
Haribo.
Yeah. I'll try to, I'm going to go to Adi's place, try to see you. I want to say hello.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, for being with us every day. So